The American College of Radiology.
Focused, forward.
Together.
Hello, I'm Dr. Amy Kotzinis, a professor of neuroradiology at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, and chair of the ACR Membership and Communication Commission. It's my pleasure to talk with you today. I'd like to start with a story. I first gave this talk at an RLI Kickstarter course in Philadelphia, which is where I did my training as a resident and fellow at Hahnemann Hospital, which is pictured here. You may have heard of Hahnemann Hospital for their financial difficulties and ultimate closure in March of 2018. As it turns out, 2018 is not the first time Hahnemann Hospital had financial difficulties, which takes me back to my days as a resident and fellow. When I was a resident, my co-residents considered me most likely to join a private practice. When I started interviewing for jobs, that's really what I focused on. And as I interviewed for private practice jobs and learned a little bit more about what that entailed, as I spent more time focusing on neuroradiology in my fellowship, I realized that that's not what I wanted to do, that I wanted to stay in an academic practice where I could teach residents and fellows and medical students. And I really wanted to focus on neuroradiology in my career. So I decided to stay on staff at Hahnemann. My first day on staff happened to be July of that year, which also coincided with the day that Hahnemann Hospital first filed for bankruptcy. And we'll pick up the thread of this story as we get towards the end of my talk. So I'm going to share with you today how to interview for your first, or perhaps in my case, next practice. Your overall goal is going to be to evaluate the practice environment and community to match your priorities as a radiologist. So we'll talk today about how you identify those priorities, key factors to evaluate in this process, how to plan what to ask before the interview, how to get the details you need to make the best decision for you. Before you even begin your search, I think it's important to step back and think really hard about what your priorities are. So, in identifying your priorities, you're going to want to think about things like the practice setting or type. Is it private practice or academic? The location or geographic setting, the schedule for the work you're going to be doing, the organization or group mission or affiliation, the cultural mindset of the group, the patient population, and compensation. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail about each of these in turn. So starting with practice type, I think the most obvious distinction is between academics and private practice, as I mentioned at the start of my talk. But there's also things to think about, like, do you want an ownership stake in your practice, or would you prefer to be an employee? There are lots of factors in the type of practice that you're going to be working in that you may want to prioritize. Next is the location or geographic setting. Um, Perhaps you want to be in the area where you trained. Maybe you would like to be in an area where you or your significant other have family. Maybe you have specific hobbies like hiking that you want to be near the mountains, or surfing that you want to be near the ocean. If you have those priorities, location or the geographic setting may be important to you. Schedule is also important. Do you want a flexible schedule? Do you want to be able to work on site or remotely? Do you want to work mostly weekdays, or are you open to evenings, weekends, taking call, and the benefits that that might accrue? Is it important that your schedule is fairly consistent from day to day, or would you prefer some flexibility with different start and stop times throughout the week? It's also important to think about the organization or group mission or affiliation. I've put an example here. I work at the Mayo Clinic, and one of our primary values is the needs of the patient come first. And that's a personal priority of mine. So there's a lot of synergy for me between, what my values are important and the important values of the Mayo Clinic. So what are your values? And make sure that you're going to be working for a group whose values align with those. I think the cultural mindset of the group is also important. And what do I mean by cultural mindset? Well, it could be things like, is it a group where people work together collaboratively? And is that something that you enjoy? Or is it a group where people work more independently? And perhaps you prefer that. It may also relate to things like innovation and willingness to change. If you're someone who is an early adopter and on the cutting edge, you may want a group that has that same type of mindset. If you're a little bit more reluctant to change, a little bit more cautious, perhaps you would prefer a group that waits until those early adopters have worked out a lot of the bugs and kinks in something new before you adopt it. So another factor to align yourself with a group. Patient population. I worked in a practice in Florida where we had mostly an elderly population and we saw mostly diseases of aging. I prefer to see a greater spectrum of patients. And so I made a move from Florida to Rochester, Minnesota. But patient population may be something important to you as well. If you have specific expertise in an area, you may want to make sure that you're joining a group where you can utilize that expertise if it's important to you. I've left compensation for last, and part of that is because as a radiologist entering practice, you are going to be well compensated. We are among the top percent of wage earners in the United States and certainly in the world. And I think that what you really want to do is focus on the other priorities. Identify your top 2 or 3 groups and then use differences in compensation to help you discriminate between which of those top jobs you would like to join. So once you've identified your priorities, I think it's really important to name them. It's helpful to write them down, to look at them. That will help you to prioritize or rank them. It may also help you to identify anything that would be considered a deal breaker because you want to identify those as much as you want to identify the things that you're really looking for in helping to find the best fit for your practice. And I think you want to be clear about your needs before you even start your search. It's going to help you identify which groups to reach out to and to do some screening as soon as the interview starts. And I would say the interview starts sooner than you might expect. It really starts with your first contact with the practice, whether that is you responding to an ad that you may see on the ACR Career Center, for example, or the group or a recruiter reaching out to you. As soon as that first contact starts, you want to be prepared. So prepare carefully and prepare in advance. Develop questions that are going to help you to assess the fit between that group and your priorities. Writing down your questions is also going to help you to get familiar with them. It will allow you to perhaps practice those questions with a colleague, with a friend, with a family member, so that you can easily ask them when the time is appropriate. And I think you should be prepared to ask every interviewer at least 2 to 3 questions. You don't want to be that person that when the interview asks if you have any questions, you say no, because that makes you look like you're not really engaged with the process. So your first contact with a group is really your first opportunity to start to assess whether the group is going to be a good fit. I mentioned identifying any deal breakers when you do your prioritization process, and this first contact is your first opportunity to identify any of those deal breakers. You don't want to waste your valuable time or the time of the practice exploring an opportunity that you can identify right up front is not going to be a good fit because of one of those deal breakers. So this is your first opportunity to elicit those. As the process goes on, you will likely have face-to-face interviews. Some groups will conduct initial interviews via Zoom or electronic means, and then invite a smaller group of finalists to interview face-to-face on site. Either way, you should consider this a two-way process. The interviewer is going to ask you a lot of questions, but you want to be prepared to ask them questions as well. Prepared questions will demonstrate your interest in the practice and your engagement with the process, and that's going to be important in their decision regarding who to hire. It's going to give you a lot of insight into the practice and into your role in the practice that's going to be necessary for you to determine whether the practice is the right fit. You may not think of it at first, but questions also allow an opportunity for you to showcase your relevant experience. As you elicit things that the group is looking for, it provides opportunities for you to highlight examples of ways that you have those skills or have that expertise that you can bring to the benefit of the practice. You don't want to wait until the very end to ask your questions. I think it's good to ask questions throughout the process, certainly as topics arise and opportunities come up to ask for additional information about something the interviewer may have mentioned. And I think some people want to know, is it okay to ask the same question of multiple different interviewers? Are they going to compare notes and know that I asked everybody the same thing? And I would say, yes, it's not only okay, but it's really important to do so because you want to make sure that, especially for some of your top priority things, that you're getting consistent answers from one member to the next if you ask this question time and again. And if you don't get the same answers, if they're widely discrepant, you're going to want to ask a lot of follow-up questions to dig into why that is. Is it perhaps perceptions that things are not fair for everyone in the group, or something along those lines? You really want to elicit additional information to help you understand why there are discrepancies. So to do this, you want to use open-ended questions. If you ask yes/no questions, that has a tendency to really end discussion on the topic. The interviewer will say yes and move on to something else, or no and move on to something else. So you want to ask an open-ended question that requires them to give you more detailed answer and also allows you to ask follow-up questions if they don't give you all the information you need. So things like, how would you describe something? Or can you tell me a little bit more about something? Walk me through, a day in the practice, for example. What does fill in the blank involve? All of these kinds of questions really open the door for the interviewer to give you a lot of detail. And if they don't, they give you the opportunity to ask for more detail that you need. So let's talk about some example questions that you might use. And we'll start with questions about the job. So you might ask, can you tell me about the physician's schedule on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, so that you can understand, is the daily schedule throughout the week the same, or does it vary? How would you describe a typical workday? This allows you to understand a little bit more about what your job responsibilities are going to be. You can follow that up with, how would you describe a typical evening shift or weekend shift or call shift? The responsibilities may differ greatly for these other shifts than they do in a typical workday shift. So that will help you get additional information. What responsibilities does being on call involve? Call sometimes involves a greater number of hospitals or a broader scope of responsibilities than your day-to-day shifts might. And then you also want to ask, can you tell me a little bit more about my non-clinical responsibilities? That helps you to understand, are you going to be responsible for things like tumor board or multidisciplinary conferences? Maybe you have to present at something like a grand rounds. Maybe the group is going to want you to give talks in the community about new services or imaging techniques that you're going to provide, or skills that you're going to bring to the practice. So understanding what those additional responsibilities will be is also important. You want to ask a lot of questions about the practice. You can ask, what is the working culture of the practice? This is where you can elicit things like, is it collaborative or is it independent? How will your work be? How does the team form? How do you maintain strong bonds amongst the practice? Or is maybe that's not important to them, maybe it's not important to you. These are opportunities to ask, where do you think the practice is headed in the next few years? That may help elicit challenges. It may help elicit things like the practice is expanding and growing, or maybe the practice is contracting, related to financial difficulties or things that may be red flags. This may also be an opportunity to help you understand how the practice embraces change. Are they early adopters or are they a little bit more cautious, and assess how that fits for you? I think it's important to ask, what are some of the challenges the practice is facing? And if you find a practice that says they don't have any, that should be a red flag and an opportunity to ask additional questions, because I think everyone faces some practice challenges from time to time. One challenge that many practices are facing is with retention and recruitment. So ask, how long has the person you're interviewing with been with the practice? How long has the average member been with the practice? If they're not upfront about the fact that they have lost a lot of members and may be in a rebuilding phase, that may be something that's a red flag. And that will help you to understand really the stability of the practice. Can you tell me a little bit about the relationship with hospital leadership? Is that a strong relationship? Is it a shaky relationship? Are there negotiations for a new contract coming up, for example? What is the relationship with the clinical staff? Is it a good working relationship? Is it collaborative? Or are there conflicts? Are there turf battles? Important to understand what those may be before you get involved. And then I think it's also a good idea to ask, what is the best part of working here? Some people may flip it to what is the worst part, but I like to stay positive. And that can be a very revealing answer as well as to what the priorities of the practice are. Particularly if you're relocating, you're going to want to ask questions about the community. Ideally, you're going to have a long-term commitment with the group and the community, so you should know a bit about it before you make a big move. So ask, can you tell me a little bit about the community? That can be a very open-ended response, and then you can follow up with some additional questions for more detail. If you have kids or are planning on having kids, you might want to understand what the local school system is like. I worked in a practice where most of my colleagues sent their kids to private school. That will be an additional expense if that's something that you're going to want to do. So important to know up front. If you're going to be working on site, what is the typical commute like? In some smaller communities, it may be very short, and that may be a priority for you. In other urban environments, it may be a little longer. What opportunities are there for whatever your favorite non-work activity is? If there are no opportunities, that may be important to know up front. And then, similar to asking about the practice, you can ask about the community. What is the best part about living here? Which can also be a very revealing answer. Lastly, you want to ask about the benefits. And in my practice, in many practices, there may be a specific person assigned to explain the benefits package to you. Often, that slot on the schedule is identified up front in your schedule. And so you may want to save most of your questions for that person, and maybe reserve some follow-up questions for other members in the practice, just to make sure that there is some consistency in the responses. I want to mention it's important to consider total compensation. You may see a large salary and then find that you have to pay for malpractice or life insurance yourself, or maybe there are no retirement plans that are offered. For example, at my practice, I have a defined benefit pension plan that makes a significant difference to my total compensation. Is the group going to pay things like your professional dues for the organizations like the ACR that you belong to? Will they give you a stipend for that? If the group doesn't pay it, do they give stipends for CME? Is CME time included in your vacation? Do you get that extra? These are all details that you want to understand. If you're relocating, it's also important to consider the cost of living in the community that you're going to be relocating to. If you're in a more rural area, the cost of living may be a little lower, the cost of housing may be lower than it is in a more urban community. And then also remember that some states don't have income tax. Local income taxes can vary from place to place. So if you're relocating, you might want to understand those because that's also going to have an impact on your overall compensation. Um, As I mentioned up front, this is also an opportunity to ask questions that give you an opportunity to highlight what you can offer to the practice. So you might want to ask, how would you describe the key attributes to be really successful in this practice? Or tell me more about the qualities you're looking for in a colleague. These can be opportunities to highlight examples of how you bring those attributes to the practice, or you bring those qualities or skills that they need. You may ask, what skills is the team missing? Tell me about some practice gaps or a niche that I might fill in this practice. That sends a signal that you're willing to be a team player, and that you may also be willing to adapt to the needs that the group needs to fill. So opportunities to highlight what you bring to the table. And then lastly, you want to ask questions about the next steps. What are the next steps in the interview process? Perhaps if you're doing Zoom interview, they'll tell you about the next steps for an in-person interview, whether you'll be allowed to bring your significant other along, etc. How will candidates be notified about the decision? Who will call you? When will they notify you? And then ask if there's anything else that you can provide that would be helpful to them in their decision making, or can you answer any final questions for the interviewer? Again, it's always good to give them the last opportunity to ask questions so that you can fill in any gaps about yourself that may have been missed. So as I summarize, I'm going to go back to the story I started at the beginning. I was on staff at Hahnemann Hospital. My first day they filed for bankruptcy. That meant that they started cutting staff salaries. They started cutting programs. The neurosurgery department, importantly, they all announced they were leaving. They were closing their residency program and relocating all of their residents to other practices. As a neuroradiologist, that had a significant impact on the patient population I would serve. And as many of my colleagues started interviewing for jobs and announcing they were leaving, I decided that I was going to resume my search. At this point, I had a better idea of what my priorities were. I knew I wanted to practice neuroradiology and not be in a general practice. I knew that I wanted to be in an academic practice. I wanted to teach. I wanted to be in a practice with residents and fellows. And I'd also had decided at that point that I was a little tired of the gray, rainy winters in Philadelphia, and I wanted to move to the Southeast where it was a little warmer and sunnier and just a better geographic environment. So I interviewed for a job at the University of Florida in Jacksonville, Florida. It was a relatively small practice. And one of the first interviews I walked into, the interviewer said to me, "I'm a little surprised that they're letting you talk to me today." And my first question was, "Oh, tell me a little bit more about that." And he said, "Well, I told them on Friday that I'm going to be leaving." And I said, "Well, you know, can you tell me a little bit more about where you're going and why you're leaving?" And he said, "Well, I'm going across town to the Mayo Clinic." I didn't know there was a Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Florida at the time. So I said, "Tell me a little bit more about that." And he started to tell me about the practice that he was going to. He told me that they were starting a residency program the following year. one of my top priorities. He told me about how financially stable the Mayo Clinic was. And certainly after going through a bankruptcy at Hahnemann, financial stability was very important to me. He told me it was a growing practice. He told me it was a subspecialized practice. And he told me a lot about the community of Jacksonville and particularly the area around the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville. So these were all factors that were important to me. And I was able to elicit a lot of details from him. And I will admit that I asked one last question, and it was a yes or no question, unlike the open-ended questions I had asked at that point. And my last question was, are they looking for a neuroradiologist? And as it turns out, they were. And I applied for the job the following month and interviewed a couple months later and started in August of that year, about a year after I started on staff at Hahnemann. And that leads me to really the final point that I want to make, and that is to be prepared. Start to be prepared today because you never know when that initial contact is going to start. It could be in the Q&A following the session that you're going to participate in this evening. It could be the next time you go to a state chapter meeting or the ACR national meeting or some other meeting. So be prepared with your priorities and key factors. As soon as you can, plan the kinds of things you're going to ask in the interview so you can get the details you need, and be prepared for that first contact, which could start at any time. With that, I'll wish you all the best in your job search and ultimately in your career in radiology. Thank you.